Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of HF Conversations. We're back with Pastor Mark again this week.
Yes,
He's here.
Thank you.
Always
Again.
good. I know. Always good to have you back.
I'm excited.
And today we want to talk about something really, I think, near and dear to your heart as someone who is a preacher, who is a pastor. And that's the idea that sort of the rise of people who would be more maybe considered preachers than teachers. And so we're going to kind of break that down just a little bit. It's kind of like a churchy thing, but I think you'll understand once we start talking about it, what we're saying. But basically there's this rise in preaching versus maybe a decade or definitely 2 decades ago where a pastor was really seen as a teacher. And so Carey Nieuwhof, who is a great speaker, pastor, leader, really a leader in a lot of ministry forefront and in so many areas. And so if Carey, if you're watching this, hey, thanks for writing all your content. We really appreciate it. You're giving voice to younger people in ministry, which is awesome. Yeah. And so he wrote this article about trends for 2018. And a couple of those things, he talked about really just the rise of preaching instead of teaching. And so he said, simply put, that preaching would speak more to the heart and teaching speaks more to the head. Preachers facilitate an experience and teachers convey information. And, we've had this conversation, honestly, for almost 5 or 6 years now. Yeah. We were talking about this back in a former church and just about the idea of like being in an experience versus like downloading that information. And certainly in the last 5 years, especially, podcast, YouTube, church online, Facebook Live, the ability to watch all those things has only grown, right? So if you want to learn from the best teachers in the world, they're literally at your fingertips, right? Like they literally have feeds that get delivered to you.
Yes.
Whereas, 20 years ago, you wanted to go hear the best teaching, the best application of Scripture that you could, whether that was from stage on Sunday, small groups, Sunday schools, discipleship classes, like, all those things. Like you wanted to go to a study because if you wanted to learn from, whoever, you had to go to the Beth Moore study to do the thing. But like, now you can just get like her podcast or, anybody's pod. Like the world is available to you in teaching format. And so there's like positives to that, but maybe there's some negatives too. And so that's kind of what we want to talk about is the rise in preaching versus teaching and maybe what that means. So what are kind of your thoughts? I think you would consider yourself a preacher, right?
Yeah, I think that is a safe label to in this conversation to kind of apply my direction.
Right.
I think
we don't want to not to brag on yourself or anything, but
I don't know that that's always considered a positive thing.
Some people have mixed emotions
in the emails or remarks or comments or. No,
yeah.
And here actually, like we were at this thing at TC Speed, actually, which is a new Highlands thing for athletes, for middle school athletes, and so not to just insert a plug into that, but also we were there a couple weeks ago, and I was having a conversation with some of our staff people who were there, and so we're getting into TC Speed, and it's just like it's athletes. It's this really exciting environment. And so some of the people working with the athletes, they're like cheering them on. They're like, let's go, they're running sprints and stuff. And so they're sweating and it's, it's an intense kind of workout. And so they're like cheering them on. They're pumping them up. They're, jumping around, dancing around, celebrating with each other. Yeah. And I looked to a couple of our staff people who were there with me and I was like, really, I blame stuff like this on why I am the way I am.
Yeah.
Or for my quote unquote yelling sometimes as people talk about in preaching stuff. Because not growing up in the church and thinking about inspiring forms of communication, what I was around was more like environments like that, more athletic settings where it was like that, where like that's what you did if you were celebrating, if you were trying to like motivate each other. It was a little more
just kind of get after it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you just translated that to speaking.
By default.
If I'm going to be in front of people, like, let's go.
By default. I remember in college, like I'd never get interviewed by anything impressive in terms of publications. So I just say that too. It's not as though that I do like tons of interviews, but I got interviewed for this publication because I was speaking on campus and stuff. I was starting this college ministry deal, and that was one of the things they kind of asked me about. And I just kind of mentioned, I don't know, I've kind of always had at different points in time in my life an intense drive to do different things. And so athletically there was that, and in this other area there was that. And so when I had this sense of like a call to speak, just the way that I did that right out of the gates from the very beginning was in that same frame of thought. And so that's not necessarily better or best or whatever else. But because of all that, I would say I am very intrigued in this kind of conversation.
Yeah, to bring in another cultural reference that I feel very passionate about, which is the Broadway show Hamilton, which I listen to on a monthly basis. Though I still have not been to see it because it's way too expensive.
Okay.
So I haven't seen it.
Even know.
But I love Hamilton. The music from it's incredible. Lin-Manuel Miranda is awesome. And so there are some songs in there where there's this sort of like cabinet battle, and it's framed as a rap battle, which is pretty cool. But there are people sort of, as the nation is being formed, and they talk about wanting to be in the room where it happened, like where these things go down, right? These big ideas are like culminating, and I just want to be in the room where it happened. I want to experience that. Yeah. And I think when I hear that and I think about this idea, that's really what we're talking about is, to me, great teaching just lives. Right? It's perfect for a podcast. It's perfect to watch on a video. It's perfect to take an online class because good teaching, solid teaching, whether it's leadership, whether it's spiritual development, theology, like all those things, they kind of can live in that medium. Whereas preaching, that can be hard to capture sometimes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like there are services that it's like, because, and this is how I know that it's true. People say you just had to have been there, right? Same thing with sporting event, right? Like, you can go watch the Super Bowl, but it'd be way better if you were there. Oh, you should have been there. And so I think what you're seeing in church as we look at, attendance and all these things that we track and we're trying to engage with people and help them become followers of Jesus, we want to say, like, what is going to help people want to be involved in this community more? Well, we want to create experiences where you don't want to miss it, right? Because just getting information, I can do that anytime, right?
Yes.
Like, if I want someone to be someone who I would consider my pastor, my someone that I sit under, it's not just like, well, they're a good teacher, because like anyone could be my teacher, right? But if we want to be a part of a community that's passionate, that you got to be there, you got to be in that moment. There's something different that happens when you're there. And even just thinking about that, right? Yeah. Just as we plan services here at Highlands, we want to make sure that it's meaningful that you come on a weekend versus like, we'll see you,
Yeah.
We put a lot of time and prayer and energy and excitement into making sure that our services mean something, that you walk away with something, not just like, well, you should come because you should come. Right? It's like you should come because it's going to be awesome. Right? Yeah, come and be informed, right?
Yeah.
So we want to inform, but we want to inspire too. And so I think, but there's also sort of a flip side of this, right? So like what are some pitfalls of this trend?
Yeah. So there's several things that come to my mind as far as this. Man, one, this is such a daunting thing for pastors. I don't think we can begin to underestimate the amount of pressure that exists there as a communicator. Like oftentimes when I'm preparing for something, I try to not listen to other people speaking about this particular passage, or I try not to Google when I have an idea about something, because it was like, for example, back in January when I did the message that I called Keep the Change, and I didn't have a ton of time to prepare for that message, and I literally landed on that as the title like 2 hours before Saturday night service began, and I thought, man, I'd not had this thought before. This is an original thought. I feel really good about this. And, and like, I don't know if it was like a month or so later, but then I realized, wait a second, this has actually been, I came across another very well-known pastor who'd like done an entire series with that name attached to it. And granted, it was in a different way, fortunately, to where it was not just, but there's a lot of pressure in that because it feels as though it's been done.
Yeah.
Like you can find it. And part of that naturally would happen as we're in the church, we're talking about Jesus, we're teaching scripture.
Sure.
There's going to be a lot of stuff that overlaps, hopefully, in our teaching and our approaches.
We do have like some common themes.
Yes, for sure. There's going to be
there's
going to be some similarities, but there's a lot of pressure there for that, and a lot of pressure for pastors to be able. I think this is why a lot of burnout is happening, and a lot of just stress and anxiety in those places. I think that could be a negative thing about some of this conversation, because it used to be you could teach the truth in a message, and that was enough. Like that felt sufficient. You could just simply teach something, and people were coming to you in the local community as the person who was going to deliver that. Whereas you mentioned, now you can find anything and everything that's out there. But in just the rise of preaching versus teaching, so positive for me, I think that I'm excited about this because I listen to guys out there talk about, I've been communicating for a long time, but I feel like there's a renewed sense of passion. I feel like there's a renewed sense of just a fire in me that even after all of these years of doing what they do, that they continue to change their approach in some of those ways. Yeah. Like I even heard Craig Rochelle recently talk about some of those things in that way of kind of a preaching emerging out of himself versus some of the teaching of the past.
And he would be somebody who I would consider very much on that teacher level for so long, right?
Yeah, and
incredible content that just gets literally distributed to thousands of churches.
And a fast-growing church, right? If you're just thinking about, it's just up and to the right, don't mess with it. Yeah. But in his mind, when he talks about this trend, it's not just the trend, it's a passion inside of him that's kind of, it's just coming out as though that he's communicating in a different way. And that's exciting to me. Yeah. That, because it's very near and dear to my heart as well, that's exciting. But yeah, as you talk about what's the flip side of this, people are excited about, some churches are growing and there's this speaking to my heart, wrestling through some stuff in authentic ways. We're loving all of that. What's some of the potential negatives of this? Well, some of those are easy to identify. Like Carrie identifies one of those in the article of emotionalism can arise, where it's just, I felt great. That felt so good to be a part of that. Yeah. I felt inspired.
It's like eating cotton candy, right? Like it feels good.
Yeah.
And then you're like hungry then.
Yeah,
like,
or donuts, right? It's like, this is amazing.
Yes.
I feel so great right now with this, but there's not any sustainable substance there. Yeah. And how long can you really continue to keep that up? Yeah. Like that's a pushback that a lot of pastors have about this is, okay, you guys, I had a pastor say this to me. I was a guest speaker. I know I'm all over the map. I was a guest speaker at a church, and he had been there for quite some time, and he was not really enthusiastic about being there. Which, if you're a pastor and you're not excited about being where you are, there was a whole nother element to that conversation that we probably needed to address. But like I go in and I'm speaking, and especially as a guest, like I'm giving them my all for sure. Yeah. And people have been around me. I was probably at close to my max level on a couple of occasions.
That could be a lot.
And I was going after it, and there was just not a lot happening there. And I talked with him afterwards, and he just says to me, just give it some time. You won't always be like that. And I thought,
yes.
Well, wait.
You will mellow and be lukewarm. Yeah.
He's like, you won't always communicate with that kind of passion. Like eventually, this is going to fizzle out. Eventually, so you can't continue at that rate of stuff. And I thought that's, on one hand, I get that over the course of time, do we pick our spots? Do we? Yeah, absolutely. We're not always like at max level, and every week and week in and week out that we're kind of there. Nor probably should we be about everything that we're talking about. But that's super discouraging. I think that becomes the expectation, that it becomes the expectation that within any church context that's where we're all eventually going to be.
Yeah,
we're all just going to eventually get there.
It's just,
to that point
eventually you'll just fizzle out.
And and the negative outside of just some of the emotionalism that can happen. I think that I was really trying to think through this and almost poke holes in my own just approach in our own generation, where Carrie mentions it's like younger people primarily these days where this seems to be a trend. And there's also a rise of biblical illiteracy. And so I would just say, in being around a lot of other young pastors who really feel like a call to be either a youth pastor or a lead pastor in a local church, and they have a gift of communicating, they have a preaching, teaching gift, and especially if they lean in the direction of preaching, it becomes easier to not know your stuff and just really be
just
all
like,
hype.
Just passion,
It's all passion.
Like,
it's all just, man, this is beautiful, this is great. And I know it's because, that's what I did.
Sure.
I started preaching at 17. I didn't know enough to be to have a lot of substance. I knew enough to be able to communicate the gospel, to share the basic of who Jesus is, which is fantastic. And to do that with a lot of passion and share that with especially peers in that kind of way, it was fine. But what I started to notice is, that doesn't go very far. Right? Like when I get into college and I'm with the same group of people every single week, pastoring them, teaching them, leading them.
You can't just do the same thing every week,
like
every Sunday.
At some point in time, you got to start to know your stuff. And I'm telling you, one of the most beautiful things I think that can happen, and people think that they exist in two separate things. But one of the most beautiful things that can happen is when it all comes together. I was so passionate about the art of the sermon or the art of crafting some of those things, because if you could take something that seems really deep and really complex and bring it into something that seems as though that I can simply reach out and grab a hold of it, and then deliver that in some kind of passionate way, I just feel like that's when connection happens. A lot. And so
that's good.
There's a ton of pros and cons, but ultimately, as we talked about, and I mentioned even in a previous conversation on here, the pendulum swings, the pendulum swings back and forth. And there was a time in the American church where, and some people, this is a pushback that people have with me. I've had great conversations with people who are like, we don't really like you very much because you're a little loud sometimes. Because you're literally,
people would even say a word like you're being preachy, right?
Yeah.
Like when I hear that, it's just like somebody's yelling at me.
They're
just talking about hell.
And
I'm bad, I guess.
They immediately go to a very dark, bad place 50, 60 years ago that I'm not even aware of. Honestly. To where there was somebody who was yelling at them about how awful they are and how much they need to change and and all those kind of things. And it was just so daunting to them that if they hear anything that sounds like it, they immediately turn away to it. But I've enjoyed so much some of those conversations to be able to respond to some of those emails or respond to some of those thoughts of, hey, I totally get that. I totally understand. Let's talk about, though, the moments for sure in which, in the message that you're alluding to, of what it is that I seem to be, quote unquote, yelling about. Because I think what you'll find is that it is not about you at all, actually. And it's not about you at all in any negative way. And it's not about you at all in a way in which I would ever be demeaning or belittling to you. It's always quite the opposite. It's always the things that ignite the passion, I think, in the modern preacher is, man, it's what Jesus has done. It's who Jesus is and what Jesus can do in someone's life. And communicating that in a way that hopefully is full of hope.
Yeah.
It's never in a way. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who are still doing
Oh, sure.
a lot of great condemning messages.
Hellfire and brimstone.
I'm sure there's still plenty of that.
Sure.
That's not, I think when Carrie writes this in this article and the way that I have been,
Yeah.
that's not what we're after. If that makes sense.
No, that's good. As we're sitting here talking about this, I think this will maybe sum up all of these things. And that is that good preaching is really a combination of preaching and teaching and communicating, right? We're talking about great communication. Yeah. And so maybe here are two words maybe that can pull this in, is that it's obtainable and inspiring, right? So it's that this maybe potentially difficult idea to grasp about God, about his love, about a character of him, his nature, right? That's extremely deep. People write books about one part of that.
Yes.
And we have to communicate that in like half an hour, right? Not easy, right? So we want to make it obtainable, but we also want to be inspiring, right? To inspire you to want to do that, to be that, to see that. So it's this, come and see, right? In a lot of ways, it's like a tour guide, right? I want to show you the Grand Canyon so you can see it, and I'll back out of the way and let you. And I'm going to build it up as we're going, right? Because we got to walk there. We got to carry our stuff up the mountain. But then when you see it, you won't see me anymore. You'll just see.
That's the hope, right?
And so that's where I think, if it's just passion, right? And people in leadership get stuck in this too, right? The spotlight gets on them. And Christine Kane says this, and I love it. She says, the spotlight will kill you.
Yeah.
Right? If you keep it on yourself and you're not prepared for that, but eventually, in every way, if you let it only shine on you, it will kill you. It will take you down. So yes, we want to be inspiring, but we want to also communicate something that you can go with, that you can experience, that you can take with you. And that's where I think churches that are doing that, and really organizations in a lot of ways, right? Like it matters that you're communicating these things. And so, but it also matters the way that you do that. Yes. We don't live in a bubble, right? We don't live in a, input information, get good results. So it's a both and, it's an art and a science, and there's this dance that happens. And so I'm excited about this. The fact that people want to talk about this, the fact that people are seeing these trends, to me is encouraging. And I don't know, maybe next year we'll have this conversation again and we'll be like, man, what's really good is teaching. Just sit down. Let's just sit together.
There's new trends every year. Well, and you're right. I mean, because now when the pendulum swings faster and faster and faster because of technology.
It's not on a decade or 2 decades. No. It could be on a year
regularly.
to 2 years. Sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure in all of that. And man, when you mentioned that, like we've had some conversations prior to this conversation of like tour guide stuff is really the way that I see a lot of things for me. Yeah. Is that one of the things that just I enjoy in life altogether is being able to go someplace, eat something great, see something great, experience something great, and then go and get some people and take them with me next time, because I'm like, you got to taste this. You got to see this.
Yeah, and I'll take you there because I had it and it's so good.
Yes.
You got to do it.
Yeah. And when I've heard about communicating in that kind of way,
that's good.
It just immediately connected with me, because that's the way that I think about things. That's the way that I think about, and the beauty of all of that is that you can take multiple people to the same building and you can describe some of the stuff about this building, and each one of them though are going to walk away with their own individual experience of that. To me, that's the power of preaching. Like in this conversation, when we talk about preaching versus teaching, is that kind of a power of being able to, there's a God space there for the Holy Spirit to be able to speak to you instead of me just telling you.
That's good.
Look at the window in the building, and this is what the window means that you need to do with this particular thing.
Right.
Instead,
just
we
kind
can
of like behold that. Right?
Yeah,
Come
you
and
can
see
describe
this.
it. Yeah. You can give a whole lot of different things about that, and then sometimes this creates space for God to be able to show them to the individual just their own unique experience with it, and that's a great thing with that. But
It's good stuff. Well, Mark, thank you so much for talking about preaching and teaching, and man, the great conversations. Yeah. And Carrie, if you're listening, I'm just kidding. No, we really do appreciate all these voices that are speaking into church culture today. It's an exciting time to be a part of the work that God's doing here at Highlands, but also just in our country and really in our world, as we're using technology and all the things that we have at our fingertips to leverage that for the gospel. So that's really what we're all about at the end of the day, and we like talking about the intricacies of that, but that's kind of where we really want to land. So thank you guys for watching, for being a part of these. We love having these conversations, love having Mark with us, and I'm sure we'll have you back again very soon. We'll do another one. Sound good?
Yes.
All right. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time for another episode.